Okay, welcome ladies and gentlemen to another Transforming Assessment webinar series on the 1st of April 2015. Today's session is about virtually enhanced language teaching, and our presenter is Scott Grant from Monash University, Australia. So Scott, would you like to begin, please?
Great, thank you very much, Matthew. So hello everyone, thank you very much for coming along to today's session, and I'm honoured to have the opportunity to talk to everyone. May I ask the question, firstly, how many of you are involved directly or indirectly, currently or in the past, in language teaching? We'll test out Matthew's little housekeeping thing at the front. See how many people. So we've got quite a few. So I have to be very careful what I say. Right. Okay. May I also then ask how many of you have ever or are currently or may plan in the future to use virtual worlds either for language and culture teaching or for any kind of educational purposes? Okay, I mean, I guess in a way that's a self-answering question because people will generally attend that are interested in those things. Thank you very much. That system seems to work really well. So, as Matthew said, I'm here today to talk about our project, Virtually Enhanced Languages. And this is it's an OLT project that we got funding for last year. The journey that I plan to take us on today, we'll start out talking a bit about the project. I then had planned to talk about task-based language learning. There may well be people here who are much better versed in that than I, so I hope you'll bear with me, and if I say anything wrong or if I miss anything, I'd be more than happy for people to pipe up and tell me. So I use SL for languages, digital literacies and drama, and cool. I also then want to talk very briefly about how we got to the point of doing the project, so the road to the EL. There's a little bit of a history there, and I was hoping to take you through that. To talk briefly about research that's come out of our work with virtual worlds, particularly with Second Life, but also with the other environments that we've created. And then to talk about some small research that we did specifically for the project involving the textbooks that are used by Chinese language programs at intermediary level in universities around Australia, and then talk a little bit about the project in the long term. There is a video which the URL should be visible to you now. That essentially is talking about the same things in a condensed version in about 6 minutes. It has live footage of a number of the different environments. It has scenes in it that are not captured in the photos in this presentation today. So at some point, not necessarily now, you might like to have a look at that video just to get a little better feel for what some of the lessons are like in our various virtual environments.
Scott, can I just interrupt very quickly? Could you copy and paste that link into the text chat box, because it's not a live link on our slide.
Oh, okay, sorry,
yeah,
sorry, yes I can. I just need to find where I've got that now. Just bear with me for one moment. Sorry, didn't occur to me. Right, here we go. No, that didn't work. Sorry, it won't be a moment. And hopefully that has come true. Okay, if that doesn't work, let me know, and I'll see if I can get one that does. Oops. Right. So firstly, I guess I wanted to talk about what the rationale behind the project. This is the sort of the more immediate rationale behind the project. And the way that we looked at it when we were thinking about the project was in a broad sense. And we were thinking about the fact that there are a number of challenges, there's lots of challenges faced by Australians, but from our perspective, there are two key challenges that we were interested in. And we felt that they really revolved around technology and foreign languages. By the way, if you hear excited young voices behind us, my daughter's decided to have a party tonight, so please forgive me. So technology in general, and communications technology in particular, of course, is becoming a big part of all of our lives. It's inescapable. But of course, the challenge we face is how best to use technology to value add, in our case as educators, obviously to the student learning experience and to learning outcomes. A lot of this is stating the obvious. but also from our particular perspective was looking at how we could increase our competitiveness in the global market, because as we know, it's becoming a more and more competitive market, particularly in our region. So that leads on to the next thought that we had, which was, well, there's this need for skills and languages other than English. And we've heard a lot of rhetoric about that over the years from the government and various quarters. And the pressure in some senses seems to be building as some of our bigger neighbour economies, particularly obviously China, but there are others, come to play an increasingly important part in our future prosperity. So mobilising technology to enhance language learning to us seemed like a logical combination. So we put in our application to OLT, and basically the application was building on the 5 years of experience that we'd had previously in working with 3D multi-user virtual environments in our introductory level Chinese language course at Monash University. And with that rationale. So what are the aims, what we're trying to do with the project? So just in general terms, we want to promote and facilitate the widespread integration of these virtual environments and task-based language learning, because from our perspective, we see the two as a very close-knit set that we want to promote, particularly at tertiary level. Our focus was on Chinese language, mainly because that's where most of our experience was, but with a view to other languages being able to use it. Lindy will recall that we have on many occasions talked about the idea of using virtual worlds for language learning for a broad range of languages. So while our project is focused on Chinese, we're certainly, what we're trying to offer would be applicable to other languages as well. And I guess
sorry about that. Could you turn off your video, because people look like they're having problems with sound. It might be bandwidth. Thanks.
Right. How's that? Is that a bit better for everyone? Ruth, is that better for you? Oh, great. Okay, sorry, that's good. So that hopefully solved that. All good. Fantastic. So we also wanted to look at ways of developing and disseminating the technical and pedagogical design standards to make adoption easier for other educators in the tertiary field. I have to say, at the time when we made the application, to some extent we had in the back of our minds also secondary level learners, but because OLT is not focused on secondary at all, so the application was purely focused on tertiary. But I think a lot of the things that we've developed would also be applicable to secondary as well. Primary is another thing, and I don't have any experience in that area, so I wouldn't be game to kind of make any comments about that. But certainly some of the things, or many of the things that we do, I would say would be applicable to secondary. So we want to have some kind of standards, I guess, that made it easier for everyone to work with the same standards, and then to have some kind of exchange or interchangeability of resources. We also wanted to develop a 3-tiered infrastructure for the resources, so that we could develop, showcase, share, and disseminate them fairly easily, and I'll talk about that structure a bit later. And then also to develop a basic suite of ready-to-use environments, virtual assets, virtual tools, and learning modules, so that essentially what we were looking at was building on what we have done over the last 5 years, putting it into a form that we can then just hand over to anyone else that is interested. So just having a look at the challenges again, the educational challenge, and I'm sure this is a familiar refrain for many in attendance today. The fact is that we've recognized the need for learning foreign languages, and as I say in the slide, especially Asian languages, but not exclusively Asian languages. But the problem that I guess we're all aware of, is that the number of students that are doing foreign languages, particularly at high school level, I think around the country, and I know particularly in Victoria, has been on a kind of a downward trend for quite some time now. Dr. Jane Orton from Melbourne University in a recent communication, which was actually sadly about the closure of her teacher training centre in Melbourne, which was set up using Victorian government funding and China Hanban funding to train teachers in Chinese language and culture for secondary schools. The funding had reached the end of its lifetime, which was I think 5 or 6 years, and there was no signs of any renewal of funding from particularly the Victorian government. So sadly, you know, all that effort now, I mean the resources are there, but the centre's closing down. And in that same correspondence, she said that one of the earliest schools in Melbourne, it was a private school, Caulfield Grammar, to set up a Chinese language program for their secondary students. They have a campus in Nanjing in China, which is quite well known, particularly in Victoria. It appears, and I may be wrong, but I'm pretty sure this is what she said, that in VCE Chinese this year at Caulfield Grammar, there are no non-background students taking Chinese, which to me was quite shocking. So there is a general trend, despite the fact that we have the rhetoric that you know, everyone seems to agree in principle that learning foreign languages is important for our young people. It would appear that that's actually not the case. Brand, I can't tell you what the exact figures are. Jane Orton's put out some papers and things which you can look up. Jane Orton, O-R-T-O-N. She's done all the statistics. I think it's fairly low for non-ethnic Australians. I'm probably saying it the wrong way, and I don't mean to be un-PC about all of this. So maybe that's the wrong term. But anyhow, students that are not particularly of, say, Chinese ethnic background doing Chinese language in the Victorian VCE the last sort of 2 years is quite low, I believe. So some more of the education challenges. So Chinese as a foreign language and foreign language education more generally, at least at tertiary level, has struggled with low contact hours. I think that's fairly clear. At Monash, we only have 4 contact hours a week. We managed to get that up to 5 at introductory level, but we were not given any extra resources, so we've resorted to using videos and the computer labs in the virtual environment to kind of make up that extra hour. Of course, everyone's facing increased budgetary constraints, and so our ability to provide quality learning, teaching, and then proficiency outcomes is constrained by those factors. And of course, heavier budgetary constraints mean higher class numbers, bigger classes, and so on. And I know there's a whole debate around whether a bigger class means better or worse education, but I think from the perspective of languages, having these much bigger classes makes it even more difficult to really do effective foreign language teaching. It's fairly clear in a foreign language classroom, so I'm sure again all of you understand foreign language classroom, the concept of it, but the idea that you're learning a language in a classroom in an environment where the language being learned is not the mainstream language, and so therefore obviously opportunities to use that language outside of the classroom in normal everyday to day situations is somewhat limited, and in that sense it is different from second language learning. So these opportunities for meaningful communication in the classroom because of these constraints and for students to get that kind of one-on-one feedback that they really need are obviously quite limited. There's also an issue at tertiary level. So in a sense, there is an opportunity for universities at tertiary level to provide foreign language education for students that, for all the reasons that are known, decided not to continue on at high school. Some of those are structural, some of those are institutional, some of those are totally pragmatic. So, if you need to get the highest ATAR score, the university entrance score, that you can to get into the particular course that you want to go into, a lot of students will decide not to go on with language because they just don't feel that that's going to contribute to that. There's opportunities there for the universities to pick up the ball and then to take those students further down the track, and even to take on beginner students, which is what we do. But there are also then issues of retention, particularly at beginner level, in the tertiary programs. And So there's been surveys done, and for example, 60% of the learners at beginner level in tertiary courses only speak English at home. So for those people, generally the non-background students, the opportunity to use the language that they're learning outside the classroom is usually quite limited. Technological challenge, and again, a lot of what I'm saying everyone knows, so please forgive me. So there are platforms like Second Life, like OpenSim. They've obviously been used now for quite a few years for educational purposes. And I think there's enough evidence around to indicate that there are definitely benefits from those environments for various different types of teaching. But even so, these environments, as I say in the slide, tend to be infrequently used. And as we all know, it involves a steep learning curve, it involves time, and it involves developing technical skills. And Matthew and I were talking about that the other day, about how much is expected, particularly from tertiary level academics, in terms of multi-skilling. And so you have to learn all these other sets of skills to be able to do a whole range of things that in the past would have been considered outside an academic's normal set of skills. Part of the problem is obviously, and it's not just with virtual worlds and developing things in there. I mean, there's many things that we do as academics where the investments of time and effort and so on that we put in are often not recognized as part of our workloads. But interestingly enough, though, for those that are interested in maybe taking on something like a virtual environment and making that part of their teaching practice, my experience is that many have started from scratch. I mean, even in a world like Second Life, where there's lots of ready-made stuff, it would seem that many start from scratch, rather than taking what other people have already built up and then sort of using that maybe as their starting point. So we did a survey of academic staff teaching introductory level, as you can see in the slide, at 20 Australian tertiary institutions, and found that of the 15 respondents, 7 had previously considered using virtual worlds, while 8 had not. So there is some interest there. Of the 8 that hadn't considered using it, the most common reason, other than never having heard of virtual worlds, which was the response from a few, was not really knowing how to start. How to sort of get the ball rolling with setting up a virtual environment, designing the lessons and the pedagogy and so on. That was also closely followed by then the difficulty that they perceived in developing resources, particularly from scratch. And for some that was just completely off-putting. So for those that had considered using virtual worlds but in the end didn't go ahead with it, the most common reason was that they didn't know how to start and that it was just too hard to develop resources. So there was kind of a message there that, particularly in terms of developing resources, that was something that put them off. So, so in terms of disseminating the use of that kind of platform, those are the sorts of hurdles that we were looking at. That was the feedback that we got from our survey. Okay, so on to task-based language learning. And again, please forgive me those of you who are experienced language educators for going through this, because it may well be that you're even more familiar with it than I am. But from the perspective of using 3D virtual world environments for language learning, language use, and language practice, one of the key elements is the whole thing of task-based language learning or task-based learning. That includes communication activities primarily, using language to carry out tasks, and using language that's meaningful to the learner and has a purpose beyond just the purpose of practicing, and communication activities that reflect some kind of real-life activity with authentic materials. So when in our case, when we say authentic materials, I guess in a sense we're talking more about the kinds of content that one might have in a dialogue when one is doing sort of day-to-day everyday tasks in real life. But we also, within our environments, include other, for example, visual or audio materials or resources that also can convey some aspects of the real environment. And in that sense, I guess they have some authenticity. So the two pictures that you can see on the screen at the moment, on the left-hand side is our I might, with the questions, what would you like me to do? Would you like me to try and tackle those as I see them come up on the screen, or should I wait until the end?
Up to you.
Okay, I'll finish this. I'll have a quick look at the questions, see if I can answer them straight up, and then I'll go on. Yeah, so the two pictures on the left is with the rabbit holding a bowl of dumplings. That is our kitchen on Chinese Island. The rabbit, to get to that point, has had to talk to a waitress, has had to talk to a seller in the farmer's market, has had to find out what ingredients to buy to make that bowl of dumplings, has had to go to the market, or they've had to ask for directions to get to the market, they've had to understand and then follow those directions, they've had to then find the market seller, talk to the market seller, ask the price, buy the items, and then come back to the kitchen. And you'll see with our robot on the right, he's successfully made his bowl of traditional Chinese dumplings. So there's a lot in there. We're conveying language. We're giving them the opportunity to practice language. We're giving them the opportunity to learn a little bit about sort of how an average person in everyday life in China might go about doing things. We're also getting them to learn a little bit about a traditional dish, which is very popular amongst the Chinese, and I'm sure many of you have had their soup dumplings or their fried dumplings as well. And what we want at the end of it all, rather than having, I mean, I love Moodle, Matthew, don't get mad at me, I love Moodle. At the end of it, you get a nice tick and a green line which says that you've got it right and so on, and you get some marks. But I guess we were aiming for something a little different with this, where at the end of that process, they would end up with a bowl of dumplings that they can see and they can look at. Sadly, they can't eat or smell, but I guess there is that sort of visual aspect to it. We also include in that, when they get the dumplings, they also get a summary of all of the dialogue that they would have gone through. So they may not have done it in perfect Chinese, perfectly matching our model dialogue, but they've done it in a way that's enabled them to get through all of the different stages, and then the bowl, when they wear it and they hold it, it then rewards them with a model dialogue if they want to revise or review or check what they've done against what we propose as a model dialogue. So from the perspective of task-based language learning, so we really want them to focus on meaning. So mainly concerned with processing semantic and pragmatic meaning, rather than having absolutely perfect grammar and so on. Obviously, clearly that's important, and we have some things built in to help correct some errors, some common errors. So this is when they're talking to the non-player characters, who are programmed characters, and they do that by typing in chat, and they do that in Chinese characters. There is some feedback on some common errors, but the main thing we want them to do is to focus on that meaning. There should be a gap. Yeah, I know, 3D noodles would be terrible. There needs to be a gap. I mean, again, this is all common, age-old wisdom. There needs to be some kind of gap in terms of the information that they get, and certainly when we design our dialogues, if they're asking, where is the market, depending on how they ask, they're not necessarily going to get a straight answer. And it forces them to sort of stop and think, okay, did I get all the information I need? And if I didn't, so what do I need to find out more about, and then how do I ask that, and so on. So we obviously create that gap. Again, under task-based language learning, the learners need to rely mainly on their own resources, both linguistic and non-linguistic. So in a sense, the teacher is there. Again, all of you, I'm sure, are more than familiar with all of this, in a sort of a guiding role rather than, a sort of a traditional teaching role. In our case, we allow students to have access to their textbooks, because all of the things they do in our virtual environment revolve around not just daily life scenarios, but we match those with what's in the textbook. So it's not to say that they're not learning anything new, because we do kind of try to bring into play the zone of proximal development, where we present them with things that are a little bit beyond what they know, and hope that they, in the process of using what they know, will then also pick up some of these new things. But everything's based around what's in the textbook, so that there is that match. And I think I'm not sure what everyone else's experience is, but with a lot of our students, if you try to take them too far beyond the main body of knowledge that they're supposed to learn, or that they believe that they should learn, you can sometimes be pushing your luck a little bit, particularly at beginner level. So we try not to stray too far and keep everything tied in with a textbook. And so, yeah, so we therefore allow them to use we encourage them to use the textbooks. It's a great opportunity for them to actually revise what we've covered in class. And then I guess the final thing is that there's a clearly defined outcome. So they get a bowl of dumplings. So they know at the very beginning, we tell them, so your goal today is not to, practice Chinese, not to speak better Chinese, not to learn. Your goal today is make a bowl of dumplings. So that kind of fits in with the concept of TBLL, task-based language learning. What I'd like to do now is just talk briefly about how we got to the current project, and just talk very briefly about Chinese Island. Some of you, I'm sure, may have seen it, some may not. But basically we started in 2008, 2009. We do 3 sessions only per semester. That may sound like very little, and in some ways it is very little. Part of the way that I approached incorporating these lessons in the virtual environment into our curriculum was to say, be conservative. Back when I first started, I have to say I was very nervous. I was very scared about trying to do these sorts of lessons. So we had these slots, which were for computer labs, already built into the curriculum. And previously what was used was fairly standard sort of, multiple choice questions, where they might listen to a short audio clip, or they might read something and then they'd answer questions. And we often got feedback from students of, why are we here? Why are we doing this now? We could do this at home, sort of thing. And the computer labs are not very popular. So in a very conservative way, I plugged our Second Life lessons into those existing computer lab slots, and so we've been able to incorporate it into the formal curriculum that way without rocking the boat too much. So we have at the beginner level, our numbers float between 140 and 150 students. Today and tomorrow we're doing our first lesson, so I'll have approximately 140 students go through in these 2 days. So today I've had about half of those do the first lesson, then tomorrow we'll do the rest. Yeah, so I've talked about the lessons being structured around the textbooks. So we cover things like, going to the restaurant, shopping, seeking and following directions, seeing a doctor, so I make the students sick, which you can't do in real life, and then they have to see a doctor and they have to go through the process of getting medication, getting better, purchasing railway tickets, renting accommodation. So each of these, as I said before, they match things that you would do in real life, and we try to structure them so that they reflect real life, but they're also part of their textbooks. And in that process, they learn about Chinese currency, and they learn about things like the sorts of fresh ingredients that Chinese people will buy in farmers markets on a regular basis, and also they have opportunity to read things like street signs and so on, which is a little harder to do in the classroom. Again, as I said before, mainly in our lessons, you're interacting with non-player characters, NPCs. That was, again, a pragmatic reason because, again, I'm sure that those of you that were in Second Life very early would remember that there were a lot of ideas floating around the beginning of how these platforms would enable students to go and to have contact with lots and lots of native speakers. Well, as it turns out, majority of speakers in Second Life are English speakers, not speakers of other languages necessarily, although recently I've discovered a fairly big Brazilian community that seem to have lots of people in their regions and chattering away in Brazilian, so that was interesting. But the Chinese community, it's very difficult. It's very different. For the mainland community, there are a number of barriers to coming into a virtual environment like Second Life. I guess language is one big barrier because not all of them speak sufficient English to be able to navigate the Second Life environment. The other big one was money. No, the students are learning Mandarin. The other big one for the Chinese users is money. You know, obviously things for us are relatively cheap. I'm not talking about renting land, but even just buying clothes and things. For the Chinese users, it was quite expensive, and there were issues with, you know, not being able to use their credit cards to pay Linden Labs for a paid account. It just got very complex, and so the huge numbers never really materialized. But even if they had, as I'm sure all of us know, you can't just send students off to a bunch of virtual world users who happen to be there doing whatever it is they're doing and expect it to go well, because obviously the motivation of those people being in that environment is not necessarily to very patiently teach beginner language learners. So, I mean, I don't know that that was ever really going to go well. To try and then, I tried on a number of occasions to tee up native speakers and so on to come and do things with my students. But again, you know, it's very difficult. The one thing that we did do in 2012, which was a fantastic year, and some of you have heard me talk about it before, we teamed up with the National Taiwan Normal University, and they are actually our partner on this VEL project. And we had their teachers come in at the end of each of our lessons in Second Life in Chinese Island, and they would do live voice-based lessons for an hour. In addition to that, we had a very small number of students who, for various reasons, could not come into class on campus. And I don't know how many distance education students Monash has, but it's not our primary type of student, whereas some of the other universities in Australia are primarily distance. And so my requirement of those students was, you can watch the lectures recordings, that's fine, you can do the online exercise, that's fine, but you must come on the Chinese Island once a week for a 2-hour lesson. I broke all the wisdom of those that, you know, have looked at virtual worlds. I put them in a standard classroom behind desks, and we did standard exercises. And my purpose of that was because they were not able to come to the tutorial, the small group tutorial lessons that our on-campus students had, and so I had in the back of my mind the sense of equity, making sure that these students were covering the same material as the students in the classroom situation. But we did do things like, if we were talking about the weather, we go and find regions where, you know, it maybe had extreme weather, and then use that to sort of talk about that topic. In that process, then the National Taiwan Normal University had a number of their students learning to be teachers of foreigners in Chinese come along to the lessons, and I would hand over half an hour to them, and they developed up lesson plans, and they worked with our students. So we have worked with live native speakers, but it's hard work to get it all organized. So the non-player characters for us have been the way to have not true native speakers, but, you know, expert, if you like, native speakers available all the time. So we've had over 1,000 students go through since 2008. So originally I had hoped that we might be able to just do a quick walk around Chinese Island, but I think it's probably easier with pictures. I'm not sure how quickly these res up on everyone's screen. This is our restaurant on Chinese Island, where the students do that exercise where they ask about the ingredients for the dumplings and so on. There is a non-player character in there where you can casually go in, and if you do speak Chinese, you can ask her to take you to a table, and she'll serve you, and she'll take your order, she'll res the dishes on the table, and so on. So students can practice that, which is not something we do in our lessons, but they can practice that if they want. So this is our new non-player character. We've moved away from the original ones that we had, which were avatars that were controlled by external servers, and then there was a chat program called AIML, which is a specific markup language for chatbots. And you know, it's good, it's powerful, and so on. But the trouble is, when you're working with external servers, if they're doing maintenance at the time that you're having classes, well, you know, your NPCs don't work. So with the VEL project, we've completely redesigned the non-player characters and the chat engines so that they sit fully within the Second Life servers. And I mean, at the end I was going to talk about this, but we can also run everything, the whole environment, restaurants, train stations, everything, NPCs, off a USB stick. And I'm sure some of you have heard of SIM on a stick. Well, we developed, and for the VEL project, everything we've developed has been developed on a USB stick and then uploaded to a multi-user grid online. So we can run everything off a USB stick. So there's much better stability now than there was. So this is just, again, some more scenes from Chinese Island for those of you that haven't seen it, just to give you a quick look. This is the canal. So there's a lot of things on Chinese Island that are not necessarily directly related to the lessons. I mean, I guess what I was trying to do was to create a bigger environment where students could, if they were interested, explore and come across different aspects of Chinese culture that were not necessarily part of a lesson. And so they can take a boat ride in that boat there with a chuanyang, which is the old women or sometimes the young women that row the boats in Suzhou in southern Jiangsu province. You can hear them sing. Of course, it's a recording, but you can hear them sing. There is, over on the other side of the canal, the traditional courtyard house. We've got a couple of little exhibitions in there. Love to do more with that, have some more exhibitions, but students can learn about a traditional courtyard house by going through, and there's various information signs and so on. And then, I mean, this is just, again, a general picture of the kind of setup with the roads. So there is a very small road network, which is great pedagogically, because then, you can build in that whole thing of, so you need to go from point A to point B. You need to ask how to get there. You need to, understand what you've been told. You need to know how to ask it. And then you need to read the road signs and that sort of thing. And we've tried to stay reasonably faithful to what a road sign would look like in China as well, so that if a student, goes to China, they'll have some idea of what they look like. This is the traditional college that we built. It's more of a showpiece than anything, but we do have a couple of exhibits in there about Chinese characters and about the terracotta warriors. And my colleague, Dr. Hui Huang, who is a colleague on the project, and we've been joined by Sarah Pasfield-Neofitu, who is my other colleague on the VEL project. So, g'day, Sarah. Dr. Huang has her background introductory level students go into this traditional college, and they actually go to the Chinese character exhibition, which talks about the various different styles and the history of the characters, and she gets them to do a quiz based on that. So that's in this, what we're looking at now. The traditional college. The stone lions, we've got them set up so that if you click on those, then you'll get information about the stone lions and what's their significance, what's their relevance. So that, for example, if you ever go up to Beijing, to the Forbidden City, you'll see very similar stone lions there, the male, the female, the significance of what they are, what they represent, and so on. So students can if they are interested, can do that. This is the little village that they do the rental accommodation lesson in, and also further down the street they have the farmers market. So this is a picture of the farmers market and the new NPC there. And so this is where the students come and talk to him, and they can click on any of that food there, and they can hear audio telling them how to pronounce the words in Chinese. They see the Romanized spelling, and also they get the characters. So this is just a quick shot of the railway station. So this is where they come and they talk to the ticket seller. They buy the tickets. They can look at a train schedule if they prefer not to ask the ticket seller, and they need to work out from that schedule, which is, it reflects the real schedule in China, what ticket that they need for their budget, for their time limits, and so on. And then they need to go and find the train, and then they need to get on the train and find the right berth. So then again, the end result in terms of assessment, we have a little quiz box in the train carriages where they answer questions about what ticket they bought, and it automatically gives them feedback saying, well, you got the right ticket, but you're in the wrong berth. Or you got the right ticket, but you're in the wrong train, or whatever. And then they'll get a mark automatically out of that, and we can record that automatically as well. And then the final one, so this is the lesson that they did today on Chinese Island. They go to a gravesite, which may sound strange, but this is one of the cultural activities, and it's for a festival called the Qingming Festival, which is where Chinese will go to the graves of their parents, their ancestors. They'll sweep the graves, They'll pray to their ancestors, they'll give them food, they'll burn incense and so on. And we get our students to do that. We get them to sweep those leaves off with the broom. We get them to kneel down, to bow to their ancestors. They get a reward from that. They get a Chinese kite. Yeah, so Qingming, right, and it's coming up soon, I think, isn't it? Yes, exactly, to show respect. We also just happen to have those two black things on the side. That's a very well-known Chinese poem, which they can click that, they can listen to it. They get the Romanized spelling of it, and then I get a note card with a translation that I did of the poem. So just to sort of not just tell them about the Qingming, they also watch a video there as well, but we wanted more than just read or just watch the video, we wanted to actually perform the actions. So today we just had about 70 students do that, and we'll have another 70 tomorrow. It's pretty chaotic, but it's just this whole idea of getting them to actually get involved rather than just sort of reading about things. So keeping an eye on the time, moving along. So the next project that we did out of that, I worked together with Dr. Christina Mayer at Melbourne University, and she is the head of Arabic Studies, and we put together an environment for her beginner level Arabic students that involved, if you look at the pictures there, on the top left hand side it was just a small section of Cairo University. Top right hand side picture was the family apartments in a suburb in Cairo. Bottom left hand corner picture is the picture of the Bawab, who is the doorman. And so part of what the students had to do was talk to local students in Cairo University in the cafeteria area there, and then they would be invited to those students' home for a Friday lunchtime meal, which culturally is very significant for Muslims. Then they would go to the home, they would have to talk to the doorman, the Bawab, who would tell them where they needed to go. And then they would go into the apartment, which we designed to be of a similar size and scale to a real apartment, so it's very squeezy, and tried to put as many typical things in there as possible. And then they go through the process of meeting mother and father, grandmother, grandfather. They have a short conversation with them. They're then invited to sit down and have lunch. They go through that lunch conversation, and then at the end of it all, everyone stands up, goes to the door, and they're seen off. So we did, again, they're all non-player characters that we programmed, and unfortunately I didn't have a picture to show you on this presentation, but in the video you'll see we developed a little kind of Apple-like mobile phone, and they interacted with the non-player characters through the mobile phone. So that was chat trees. They had Arabic characters. They had multiple choice responses, and if they chose the wrong response, they get feedback on that, and then if they chose the right response, the conversation would then move on. So part of the, just very briefly, part of the reason for that experiment was because we felt we were trying to look at whether or not by moving some of the cultural content of beginner level courses outside of classroom time, whether or not the learning would be as effective as in the classroom, and if it was, then we could free up classroom time to do other things that are better done with the teacher face-to-face. We got funded by the LC Now group, which is a Language and Culture Network of Australian Universities. It was a very small $2,000 grant. Then I basically explained what we did. We did a little bit of research based on that. I'm just going to skip through this because we're running out of time. So at the end of, so what we did, we had a group of students that went into the virtual environment and went through what I've just described, meeting the local students, going to their home, having a meal. We then had another group of students that were in a normal classroom with their regular tutor who went through the same material, but just in the sort of the normal way that one would go through it. At the end of it, we had them do a quiz, and look, I'm not saying that this is able to be generalized to all students, but what we found was that the students that did the cultural lesson in the virtual environment had a slightly, statistically probably totally insignificant, but a slightly higher average for their quiz outcomes than those in the actual classroom. So we weren't trying to prove that the virtual world was better, we just wanted to prove that it was as good as. and then the idea was you could move that content out of the live classroom to to the student's own time, and then utilize the face-to-face time in a different way. I'm kind of rushing on a little bit now here. What I wanted to look at was the next stage, which was we developed virtual Prato. So some of you may be aware that Monash has a center in the northern Italian city of Prato, where our students can go and they can do short courses over there that count towards their degrees, not just language. They can also do history of art and architecture and various other things. So previously, they got they go through an orientation before they go to Prato, but it was felt by the head of Italian studies that it was very inadequate. At one point it boiled down to them watching a video which was a cartoon about how crazy Italian drivers are. So the head of Italian studies got together with my colleague Sarah, who I think is there. I haven't checked on the list again. Hopefully Sarah's still with us. Yes. And really, Sarah and Patricia, who's the head of Italian studies, they drove this whole thing, and we thought, so they were thinking about, okay, so what can we do to provide students with a different kind of an orientation than just a simple video or printed materials. I mean, the printed materials are very important, but they were looking for a way to get them to familiarize themselves with the center and a couple of important landmarks nearby, also to familiarize themselves with, say, going and doing something as ordinary as ordering a coffee in the cafe next door, or ordering a meal. To do that, they need to have money, so they had to find, you had to go to an ATM. So we developed all of that, and we've done a couple of orientation sessions now. I think we've done about 4, and I believe more are planned. And so here's just some very quick shots of that environment. So this is Via Pugliesi, which is the actual street. That's the cafe next door to the Monash Center, which is the blue flag just up the road. We actually hired a girl in Florence to go up to Prato to go into the cafe and then to take photos and measurements, and then she made some of the models that have then gone into that cafe. I built the rest of the street scenes based on Google Maps and photos that staff from Prato sent to us, and other photos that I could find around the place. So it's not an exact replica, but it's as best that we could get. Again, populated by non-player characters that interact in Italian, and we've used a slightly different model with these NPCs, but even so, to order your coffee, so that the sort of the cultural aspect was, or one of the cultural aspects was, you go and ask for a cappuccino, and they'd ask you, had you paid, and then you'd have to go back to the cashier, and then you'd have to pay, and we have virtual euros that they use, and then go back to the waiter behind the counter and get their coffee and so on. So that's one of the things that they do. This was a replica of the student lounge in the Monash Center. So we also wanted them to familiarize themselves with the layout of the center. And so we put up the same signage. The girl from Florence went in and she took photos of the inside, and then we made the models and put those in there for the students to familiarize themselves with an area that's important to them while they're there. We also, they have beautiful stairways and a nice entranceway into reception, so we kind of built out most of the inside other than the classrooms. We also then, there was a couple of well-known landmarks. One of the most famous is the Duomo, the cathedral there, so we built a replica of the cathedral. Within that, we've also built a replica of one of the chapels, which has the famous holy relic in it, which is the girdle of Mary, and so on. So I better move on, because otherwise I'm not going to tell you about it. So we did the Emperor's Castle. There's another exercise where they have to go to the castle, they have to find it and find out opening times and so on. So I better move on. In terms of research, we've done over the years, we've done a number of different types of research. We've looked at self-efficacy, we've looked at cognitive skills, we've looked at foreign language anxiety, in terms of comparing what happens in the classroom and face-to-face, what happens in the virtual environment. And then we've also looked at things like negotiation of meaning and attempts at self-repair. And this has all come out of the work that we've done in virtual environments. For the VEL project, we surveyed, as I said before, all of the tertiary institutions in Australia that are teaching Chinese to find out what textbooks they were using. We then dug into that to see what content in their textbooks would be suitable for doing the kinds of lessons we do in virtual environments, and found that there was 9 common topics that are across all of the textbooks and that would fit very well with what we've been doing in virtual environments. So then what we've done is to be able to hand this over to you. So if any of you wanted this environment, you can go to our project site, you can download the OAR file, and it has the whole environment in it. But to be able to do that, I had to rebuild the original Chinese island. Yes, OpenSim, Brand. I had to rebuild the Chinese island environment myself so that I knew that the IP rights were clear. There was no issues with accidentally giving you something that somebody else had made. So when I rebuilt it, I did it in a slightly different style to Chinese island. Chinese island was built by a young guy, the buildings were built by a young guy in southern China, but were built more along the lines of a slightly exaggerated or slightly sort of fantasy type perspective, and I wanted to build something more along the lines of my experience of China, and certainly something more rural. So the restaurant looks different, but has more real world. I mean, some people in the cities will say, no, you know, this is not right. But if you get out of the cities and you get into the countryside, it's more like that. So, you know, the restaurant has similar facilities. You know, you can order food. You can do all of the things that I talked about on Chinese Islands. It has the kitchen and so on. That's the main street with the apartments off to the side. Not as colorful as Chinese Island, but closer to what you would see in China. We built our traditional garden with the pavilion there. We also have an exhibition in there about the Chinese space program. It's also where we do where we will do the initial skills training. But it's also just a nice area for students to go into. Just some of the scenes outside of the traditional garden, the canal there. Eventually I'll have the boats back on the canal. This is looking down towards the village. So I've actually tried to go for a much more rural theme here. We have a village there. We have the sort of the open countryside. We have crops, and so I'm thinking ahead of other things, other lessons that we can build. This is looking back to the township from the village. So there's a bit of distance here, which we don't have on Chinese Island. It gives them an excuse to actually have to use the bus, and so we can bring in this whole thing of, you know, get on the bus and go to the 3rd stop or something like that. Different farmers markets. So we actually have 2 farmers markets in this OpenSim VEL version, so that you can then have an exercise where the waitress says, okay, so the farmers market at the village is cheaper, the farmers market over in the township area is more expensive for one or other ingredient, and you can sort of build a more complex task out of that. We have, again, all of the vegetables there, and I've got a little shot there of the actual, what we call the VEL HUD, and this is how they interact with the vegetables. So when they click on the vegetables, they hear the audio, they get the pinyin Romanized spelling in the middle, they get the big characters off to the left, so this is at the top of the picture. So they're getting all that kind of feedback through our HUD, our heads-up display. And there's the currency, just a quick example of the virtual currency. There's a virtual wallet, and it calculates everything. So when you know, if they're told a price, they buy it. It calculates the difference. It gives them change. It does all of that. And then this is just an example of the graves in the VEL environment, which again are a bit more like what you would see out in a countryside. Railway station, again, it's different, but you can do all the same things. Again, this is where they go and they buy the tickets. So it's the same as Chinese Island, but it's just all been rebuilt so that it's IP free. We have the airport there with the plane that flies, same as Chinese Island. So I'm going to keep moving because I've got about 2 seconds left. So our main thing is, in the long term, we want to share what we've done over the last 5 or 6 years with other educators, not just in terms of giving them, you know, all of this virtual stuff, but also the sort of pedagogical approach and design and so on that we've had with the lessons. So far on our website, I've already put up 3 lessons. I need to actually adjust those a bit more to make them a bit clearer, but, you know, everything that we do, all of those resources, dialogues, all of that sort of stuff we're putting up onto the project website. this is just talking quickly about our project website. There is a URL there. I can type it in. It's just www. Oops. And on that site, so there's not a lot of resources there just yet. I'm in the process of now putting all of that stuff on, but we want it to be a place where other people can just grab the resources, download, use them as they would like, but we'd also like to have it as a place where they might communicate with us, with each other, and talk about what they've done, what they think could be done better, and so on. Maybe even things that they've developed, give back to us, we'll put on the site for everyone to share. That's what we really hope will happen, that other people will take what we've done and make it better. We have a demonstration region, which is on Zeta Worlds. It's OpenSim. It's very cheap compared to Second Life. It's 20 US a month compared to 1700 US, 1700 Australian a year in Second Life. So it's very sustainable, and we have to sustain for 5 years, as with the website, and it's hypergrid enabled, so you can hypergrid to it. And so everything that we develop on the USB stick, we put up there for people to go and just try out if they want. It involved international collaboration with the National Taiwan Normal University as well, contributing to the project. Associate Professor Yuju Lan. Particularly, she's very strong on the whole distance education and Chinese as a foreign language education in Taiwan. This is just a quick list of some of the resources that we'll make available. So there will be pedagogical ones, there will be technical ones, instructional guidelines and so on. How one might design a lesson, how one might run a lesson. Picture of USB there, that's the USB that I use to store the whole environment. So there'll be full environment files on the site. You can download it, the whole environment's there. So I've talked about how we'd like others to contribute back to the project. And I guess the hardest thing, I think, for me, because I'm not very good at it, but I think it's a difficult task anyhow, is to build some kind of community around this where we exchange ideas, we seek assistance from each other, we look for collaborative partners, particularly not just in developing virtual resources and lessons, but research is a big one, obviously, for all of us that are involved in particularly in tertiary academia, and so we really hope to generate also some research opportunities as well. And I think I've hit the end slides. I'm sorry the last bit was a bit rushed, but hopefully that was useful. Yeah, be great to get some stuff going with Warwick as well. We've also had some inquiries from New Zealand, Victoria University. Edith Pilaf, who's a technologist there, is meeting with their intermediate Chinese language coordinator next week to look at whether there might be some opportunities to do some stuff with their students as well. So, if anyone's interested, we'd love to talk to you, and we'd love to work with you.
Okay, Scott, Jeff here. That was great. Thanks very much for that. I've just got a question really about assessment, and that is, you talked a little bit about assessment in world, and I was wondering what thoughts are being given to the weighting of assessment in world versus out of world, and then what types of assessments can you do inside the virtual world?
Yeah. It's an interesting question. So I'll be straight up and say that we did fairly early on try to have assessment that would then count towards some kind of final mark for the unit. One of the problems we encountered was the technology, and it didn't always work. And then you had the issue of some students might have finished whatever it was, and others didn't. And so how did you ensure equity in terms of assessment? And so I have to be honest, we kind of steered away then a little bit from making the assessment a formal part of the final mark for the unit. And so the assessment took on more of a kind of a formative, I guess, if you like, rather than summative, a formative kind of nature where the computer labs are compulsory, attendance is taken, they all know that. We tend to focus much more on the benefits that they can get out of doing them. And then, try to reward them for their efforts. When we say assessment, it's more like, you can see the fruits of your labor at the end of it kind of thing. So in that sense, the assessment is totally weighted to external. We do use, we use Moodle basically for our quizzes. I haven't gone down the path of Sloodle, so trying to have the assessment actually in world. I mean, there's been a lot of talk about that in various different papers over the years. But I find it's easier. I mean, at some point I want to talk to Matthew about further possibilities because he's done a lot of work in this area. But based on what I know to this point and what I've seen and experienced, basically when we have quizzes, we get them to do it on Moodle. And obviously that can aggregate whatever results are there. But I guess for me, what's more important is, the student at the end of the process actually holding the correct train ticket in their hand, or if they haven't, then working out where they went wrong along the way kind of thing, giving them that kind of feedback. So I'm not sure if that answers your question there, Jeff.
Yeah, no, thanks very much for that. And really, I was just interested in your thoughts on that and how it all works. Mind you, what you just said about having the ticket in the hand, that actually to me is an assessment task, and that's authentic responses that you can actually measure then by actually recording that the student has got the right ticket. I mean, to me, that's a really interesting way to rethink some of the assessments that we do. But anyway, I can see Meg has got her hand up.
Oh, hi, thanks. Scott, I've never been into a virtual world, certainly not second world, but you're talking about having a ticket in the hand. What forms of feedback can a learner get?
Yep, good question, Meg. So basically, when they're conversing with the non-player character, there's feedback that comes through the actual dialogue, both I guess overt feedback in the sense that I have over the years combed the logs of student dialogues and sort of piled together some of the more common mistakes. And so as part of that dialogue, there are times if the student makes a mistake that we've put into the dialogue, they will get direct feedback saying, "Oh, you just said whatever it is. Did you mean to say whatever it should be? Please say it again." And so they get that kind of a feedback, and then they get the chance to say it again, and then the conversation will move on. Then in terms of so with the tickets and so on, I mean, essentially the tickets and things like that, in the medical clinic we also have medicine that they get and so on. We design it so that it actually reflects the real world ticket with real world information on it. I guess that for them is a kind of a feedback that, oh well, I've succeeded in getting a ticket. Then, for example, in that case, I make them go and find the actual train, and we have 3 trains there, and then we'll get them to go into the carriage and find the actual berth. So they have different types of berths, and they need to look at the tickets and work it out. And then at that point they get their sort of next feedback, probably more in relation to the task, I guess, but it's a reflection of whether or not they successfully negotiated the task under the criteria we've set for it, where, as I say, I used to go around checking everyone's ticket. I still do a little bit, but we set up a little a box that they click and they answer a couple of questions, and that immediately gives them the feedback, as I said before, in text form, which says that, great job, you've got the right ticket, you're on the right train, and you're at the right berth, 3 out of 3 marks. Or it might be, you've got the right ticket, you're in the right train, but the wrong berth, or the right ticket, wrong train, right berth. So in that sense, then, they get that feedback in text form. I mean, I guess there's a difference between feedback and reward. At the end of that task as well, everyone, regardless of how well they've done, gets a a model dialogue back as a reward so that they can then go through and have a look at you know, what the conversation might have looked like in a more ideal situation compared to what they've done. So there's that sort of feedback. And I guess the other thing I need to emphasize is this is not just me and students all in a virtual environment interacting solely in the virtual environment. We do this in a physical classroom. We're all physically located together. We do have occasions when students are not physically with us. They're not co-located, they're somewhere else, and they join in. But there's a lot of interaction between me and the students, and me going around, and they, you know, might have a problem with their dialogue, and they'll say, oh, you know, 老师, teacher, I don't know what's going on here. I've tried this 3 times, and I keep getting this thing back saying, look, please say it again, please say it again. And I've even built in a little program that if they get something wrong 3 times, it sends them a message saying, hey, I can see you're having trouble here. How about you check your textbook, and if you can't work it out, call the teacher over. And then I'll go over and I'll sit down with them, and one-on-one, we'll have a look through the chat history, and then I'll say, okay, so have a look at this part here. You know, read out to me what you said there, and they'll read it out, and then I'll say, okay, you know what? You see that character there? You actually spelled it wrong and got the wrong character, or you might have got the grammar wrong. And so it's having the non-player characters actually, for me anyhow, means that they're the gatekeepers for the tasks, and the students interact with them, and then I'm free to go around and look at what they're doing and then give that direct feedback there. So that's the other form of feedback that we give.
Thanks, Scott. Sounds like I need to get into one of these worlds. It sounds like fun. And it's like quite a variety of types of feedback. Yeah, sounds good.
You're welcome.
Okay, Brand's typed in a question there.
Yep. Brand, the answer is in our lessons currently, apart from the ones that we did in 2012 with National Taiwan University, they are the primary interlocutors, if you want to put it that way, with the students. It's not just conversation. I mean, they are programmed to actually be able to give the item once it's been paid for. So the virtual wallet talks to the NPC and says, yes, it's been paid for, now hand over the item. And then the NPC will hand over the item. So the students can't get it unless they go through the conversation. That was the thing I wanted. And they are currently set up, they are now set up using LSL code. So for those that are not familiar with what that is, the virtual environment of Second Life has its own programming language, which is kind of a derivative of a mainstream language. And I wanted that because, as I said before, the problem of having external, possibly more powerful chat engines, but subject to all of the vagaries of servers talking to other servers. So I very strongly wanted to have everything based in Second Life, but also, to be honest, because I wanted to promote this idea that you could have all of these resources on a USB stick. So, you know, I had in the back of my mind secondary school. There may be some schools that are very conservative. There may be some schools that don't have. And again, can I just say straight up, this is not my idea. This has been talked about and researched very thoroughly by other people far better versed in all of this than me. But I like the idea that you know, or school or parents may be nervous about their children going into those kind of environments. So being able to run it off a USB stick seemed like a great idea. There are very generous people out in the community that have set that up. And so it's a resource that can be downloaded for free, and then we've basically used that. And as I say, you know, Matthew himself has got some fantastic ideas about how one could then also incorporate in things like Moodle assessment, all on a USB stick. So there's some exciting stuff out there, and that's why, Brent, I wanted everything in the LSL script. I don't know what it's going to be like with the new Second Life platform that's coming next year. I believe, Matthew, you can correct me, I can't remember, it's either C++ or, what was the other one, C#, which are professional programming languages. So I'm not sure what's going to happen then.
Yeah, both are common. I'm not sure which one they're going to use.
Yeah. But I think, again, even for the future, I mean, we may not go onto that platform at all. We may stick with what we've got. But even with that platform, I would still opt for the same thing. I know there are powerful external programs, but until such time as you can guarantee that it all interacts, the different servers interact with each other smoothly and reliably, because I've had it happen in class where you get into class and you've got 30 students sitting there and they got to log in and they go to do something and your non-player characters are not there, or they're behaving strangely, and the stress that comes from that is just not worth it. So yeah, as Lindy says, that's right, most schools, and you can't blame them. So I think OpenSim is great. And again, Lindy's much more of an expert on this sort of thing, seriously, than I am. I mean, I've only just started looking into it for the VEL project, but I think OpenSim definitely is the way to go for many schools, because they can have much higher level of control, and the quality of what you can do is not. I don't think it's inferior to Second Life. I mean, they've invested a lot of money, a lot of resources, a lot of hours to develop the physics and various other aspects of it, and that is fantastic. But I think OpenSim is more than strong enough to meet the needs of most schools and most curricula that are going to use virtual environments. But that's just my opinion.
Okay, folks, we might stop the recording there. You're welcome to stick around. As I've already put into the text chat box a couple of times, if you could please fill in our survey, that would be fantastic. The link on the slide there, the blue link, is also active, so I'll stop the recording. But thank you, Scott. Most interesting. I think people really enjoyed this one. And I'm sure they can get in contact with you. Is that right? If they want to find out more?
Absolutely. Yes,
yep.
No problem at all. I don't know if I put that up there.
Okay, so Scott's put his email address into the text chat box. I will place all of this material will go onto our Transforming Assessment website, so there will be a recording, text chat, log, and also the slide set. So Scott, if you don't mind, I'll PDF it and stick it up on the website as well.
No problem at all. Thank you, Matthew.
Okay, thanks, Scott. So stopping the recording now.